Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We're super excited to welcome back an alum of the program, Nish Patel, founder and CEO of ClutchPoints. This was actually one of our few alums who's actually done the program twice, and we're excited to hear from him and his whole experience and to the present day. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Fenwick, a legal sponsor who has offices throughout the US, but is based in Silicon Valley and is a leading tech law firm, as well as Lightspeed Ventures, a leading venture capital fund out of Silicon Valley as well. So with that, Nish, great to have you back. We're actually in the space. So, I think you might be our first speaker to actually be back in person. So I appreciate you making the trip and joining us here, as well as some people out there virtually.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you got a very professional setup for being one door away.
That's right. That's how we do it, hybrid style here at Startup UCLA. For those, I know you had to do quick meetings with the teams just now, but for those out there who aren't as familiar, maybe you could give just a brief overview about what ClutchPoints is, and then we can kind of jump into your background.
Yeah, so currently ClutchPoints it was always supposed to be a for fans, by fans sports media platform. I was a big time Laker fan growing up, and I always saw that when the Lakers were hot, everyone talked about them. When they weren't, no one talked about them. So what I was trying to figure out is, this is a big market being in LA. What about smaller markets, right? Atlanta Hawks, Charlotte Hornets, things like that. So we essentially looked to do is try to create a platform where we could have individual fan bases for every team. When we first started this, it was right when Facebook first started. So it was on Facebook, and then we went to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, basically everywhere, right? So yeah, that was kind of the evolution and the premise of creating the platform and being different from like our big competitors, which are owned by big conglomerates, right? Disney owning ESPN, Turner owning Bleacher Report, things of that nature.
Nice. All right. Well, awesome. And so, when we first connected, you were an undergrad, you were in school, and I always think it's inspiring for people to hear that undergrads or any current student can actually really dig into things and get things off the ground. So what was the first thing that sort of got you going as far as with ClutchPoints? Like, what was it you had a certain experiment set up? You had something you wanted to try? Was it like a post? Like what's kind of the genesis of how you first got going with it?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is even taking it before I got into college. I was kind of really interested in entrepreneurship. And I think was it Juan who came in and asked me the question regarding my first business endeavor, which he found on my LinkedIn, which I didn't actually forgot it was even on there. But it was
points for Juan for doing his research.
Yeah, it was called Prints for You. It was a t-shirt printing company that I started, and basically I was the president of a few clubs on campus. I was trying to figure out, how do I get t-shirts at a higher cost? That was our most expensive cost coming in. Trying to figure out how to do it at a cheaper cost. So I essentially found the exact people that were making it, actually producing it, basically cut out the middlemen, created our own industry around it, and then duplicated against a bunch of high schools in SoCal. So started that, and while that wasn't like what I was really interested in doing, it was just something that I used to fix that problem. And then I kind of learned like, hey, fixing that problem, what's next? And when Facebook pages first came out, I saw the whole genesis of how people were using that platform to build pages. So there's a player that was really doing well at the time. His name was Derrick Rose. So I created a fan page around him called D Rose's D Man. As corny as it was, that's how every Facebook page was back in the day. That's how it all started. So I built that page. We got to 100,000 fans. And the only thing I knew to that point on building businesses was t-shirts. So I was like, all right, we'll build t-shirts, and we'll build a t-shirt apparel line around some Derrick Rose products, right? And we built some slogans, some content. He was the MVP, best player in the league that year. So we were able to leverage that to actually drive sales and figure out a way to monetize those. Then what happened was, I was a bio major at UCLA going into my second year. He went out with a torn ACL, and I was like, okay, this whole thing is shattered. He's not even playing for a full season. How do we think bigger picture? So one of the most viral things actually happening at UCLA at the time was there's a UCLA memes page that was going viral on Facebook. And it was like a bunch of just random things that, if you're at UCLA, you knew everything that was going on in that page. So I basically leveraged that and some of the top players we had at the UCLA basketball team to just kind of create meme content, parody content, all that kind of stuff around what they were doing, and scaled up the NBA memes brand, which is what I called it at the time. and it went viral. We had like 100,000 fans in a week. We had 1 million fans in a month. And nowadays people on TikTok, they could do that so quick, but back then that was a big deal to be able to do that on Facebook. So we're able to leverage that to get an audience and then kind of build out that dream of how do we build individual fan pages. So we built like Clippers Nation and Bulls, and for NFL as well, we did Patriots and Packers and all the different teams. So we did that for NBA and NFL teams and scaled it up. I was still a bio major, still going to be pre-med. And then I was like, hey, maybe I should learn a little bit more about business. So I continued with bio, but I also did econ. So I ended up double majoring in econ and bio.
Nice. So, I think there's a couple of good lessons in terms of what you were talking about, but one of them is just like getting out there and experimenting and trying new things. And, so I definitely appreciate that doer mentality and getting out there and doing things. But I think the other part of it is also doing it on those newer platforms where there's more room and opportunity and maybe less competition. And so maybe like you're saying, maybe TikTok is a little bit closer to that experience today relative to that. But what do you think motivated you to go ahead and try these things and push them out? I know you were saying in high school it was about a need, I don't know if, creating NBA memes is a need, but I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, it was at the beginning, it was all for fun, right? It was just me and my friends. We were already making fun of these things. And, at the time it was hard to even take screenshots of what was going on TV and things like that. I was literally just taking my iPhone 3 at the time, right? And I was taking a picture of what the Kobe reaction or the LeBron reaction, putting some text on the top and the bottom. And throughout that process, my biggest need was how do we make memes faster, right? So I actually built a website. It was nowadays you probably know it as a game, but it was called whatdoyoumeme.com, right? And we literally built a website where you could just go upload your photo and make a meme. So people were then creating content for us. And we got a whole community feeling going, where then we would post them, we would credit them, and then people felt part of the community. So the first person we actually hired was to come in and like engage with the fans, message the fans back, react with them. And that helped kind of get the community to a point where everyone kind of felt like they knew each other, even though it was all online.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think that's, the other interesting thing in terms of when you're describing it here is taking a normal human behavior and then, pulling it in or trying to make a business or do something with it. Like you were messaging your friends and joking about it. And now it's like, maybe there's another way or another market, or maybe someone else will think it's funny. And one of the things I always sort of appreciated about, your voice and the ClutchPoints voice was that there was a lot of humor in the early days in terms of how it was approached. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that in terms of how you were able to use that as a growth mechanism or how you could differentiate against traditional media.
Yeah, what we've noticed is, and there's something it's kind of obvious, right? When you're looking at content, the things that are gonna hit you are not like, generic things. You got to go for either comedy, you got to go for emotion. There's certain things that you have to hit so it hits something with that audience, because there's so much content on social media these days that you just scroll. So the thing I tell our team every day is, how do you make sure you have something that's going to kind of stop you when you're scrolling, right? Like whether it's something creative or interesting, or I always say, the example I always give is, hey, you've seen LeBron do this, you've seen LeBron do that, but you've never seen LeBron underwater, winning a championship, doing whatever. So try to think really outside of the box and try to put it out there. So people are going to scroll and be like, wait, what was that I just saw? And then share it with their friends and be like, oh, this is funny. And that's how we were able to build a brand, because it was a very crowded space, especially when we went to raise our first round of funding. And this too, Robert. It was like, okay, what makes you different from ESPN? What makes you different from Bleacher Report was some of the top questions we got.
Definitely. Now, I mean, the traction you described was pretty phenomenal in terms of like being able to get that going in, such a short amount of time. What would be your advice to someone else who's kind of saying, okay, I'm thinking about posting some stuff on TikTok? I mean, I guess maybe you already said some of this, but, I think that idea of like, a lot of people are really, it's hard to get out of the gates because they're like, oh my God, how do I get my first 100 followers or first people to follow this? Like, any advice on that level?
Yeah, so I actually gave a talk here like 3-4 years ago, and someone asked, how do I build a Facebook page? And I was like, there's no way. There's no way to build Facebook pages successfully now. And the issue became that Facebook started owning everything. They owned like Instagram and then WhatsApp and started taking over the whole ecosystem. So it was like, there was no other way to like create content. And if you already had a following, it was tough to catch up to those people. But I think platforms that came out now, like TikTok, and now TikTok releasing this whole creator fund, it like opened up a whole new door for people to like good content just won. On Instagram, it was like you have a big following, you win, but now on TikTok, it's just good content win. So if you can create a good average watch time, you get people to rewatch your videos, share your videos. It's the best way to grow. You just have to give them like, it's kind of like when you're watching a show, right? Whether it's Stranger Things or whatever you're watching, there's something that they're holding on to as you watch episode to episode. They might like have some more storylines, but there's something you're waiting for that finale. And if you kind of keep that same mentality with even a 30-second or 1 minute TikTok, you can kind of build that same mentality out there.
And do you think of it as being a thing where it's like, I have to post every day, or I got to be active all the time, like, or you can be less, I don't know, more sporadic about it?
When I first started posting, my entire strategy was on a schedule, except schedules didn't even exist, right? You couldn't even create schedules on Facebook because the first thing that came out for Facebook was just regular posting. So I was actually in my dorm room. I was living in Reber, and I would have posts lined up on my laptop for like 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., right, overnight, and then set my alarm and then wake up and just press post. And my thought process on it was, hey, it gives me a comparative advantage because not many other people are posting at those times. So I was able to leverage that to have a consistent thing where everyone knows every 2 hours there's going to be a post. I think that's changed a little bit now. And now it's more about just good content rather than when you post. In the beginning, they're just trying to fill up their news feeds and figure out what was working and not working. But now I think it's more about just get out good content. Doesn't matter when you do it, but do it on a consistent basis. Like we have a snap show we do every week now, and our goal is just be consistent with it. They know every week what's coming, and create. Every channel should have like a genre to it, right? What is people are expecting every week, rather than just being like random. It can't just be any kind of sport video. It should be like a stats sports video series, or it could be a culture one or an apparel one or whatever it is. Just stick to that, so you actually build like a viral fan base.
Oh, sorry. This happened to me last week. So, all right. So in terms of team building, and I know you sort of had a UCLA flavor to what you were doing with everything. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because we're always talking to people about leveraging either resources here on campus or the greater UCLA community. So maybe you can talk a little bit about team.
Yeah, so when I first started here, I was trying to figure out how to build a team, right? And we built one page, we built every NBA, all the NFL team. At a certain point, we're up to 300 social media properties, and it was like, okay, there's no way I can manage all these day to day. How do we get help and build that same community aspect? So the first person I hired was Willie, who was essentially actually went to my high school and also went to UCLA as well. So I already knew him from before, so I was able to bring him on. But beyond that, the way to scale for us was there was no real entrepreneurship at UCLA at the time. Startup UCLA actually didn't even exist my freshman year here at UCLA. So what we essentially did is I looked to create a club called Bruin Entrepreneurs. We found some other people that were doing some other entrepreneurship programs and launched up a club called Bruin Entrepreneurs, brought everyone together. And that actually helped me find some team members and grow and scale the team as well. And also learn from people, right? We'd go there and talk about what issues I was having, what issues other people were having. And that allowed us to grow. And we actually continued that going into the Startup UCLA program as well. And as Robert knows, we actually ended up taking 2 or 3 of the teams that we all combined, and they actually joined ClutchPoints. So that was kind of our model that we used. And there were many other things along the way, right? We started LA Hacks. So we did a hack camp at LA Hacks where we taught people coding, and we give awards away for people. And it was able to connect the community more so people could reach and find the right people.
Definitely. And how have you felt like, as things have progressed, because now you were telling us that you have, what is it? It's over 100 people now who are involved with ClutchPoints. So how has it been scaling the team and also doing that during COVID and remote work and who knows what else?
Yeah, so as we were at the UCLA office here for a few years, and after we left, we went to Sawtelle area between here and Santa Monica, basically. Got our office there. And it was great, right? We had people in the office. We had about 15, 20 people that were coming to the office every single day. And we were going to scale that initiative while also scaling the international, right? We started in the Philippines, and now we have people everywhere from Croatia, Philippines, India, Australia, UK, basically all across the globe. And that was fun and interesting. And at a certain point when we had our office, and we had it for 5 years until the pandemic basically got rid of it, it was tough, right? Having people here, having people international. And I think the biggest part for us being a social media company is there's a lot of US culture that people outside the US don't understand. right? So having them understand that and get that part was difficult. But I think once we built a solid team, got a foundation, we actually went to a training on like, hey, here's what the US feels about certain things. Because outside the US, I feel like the news they get isn't as people would feel about it here. So that kind of stuff made it difficult. But overall, once we were all remote, it didn't really matter where people were. It was just about hiring talent that made sense for every department.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. Now, in terms of you know, the sports landscape and how it's sort of evolved, so we were able to build up all these different properties. Maybe you can kind of explain where you kind of went from there, or where you're kind of seeing things over the next couple of years for ClutchPoints.
Yeah, so for us, for ClutchPoints right now, it's all been about original IP, right? There was this whole streaming war that happened between Disney Plus and Netflix and HBO Max and all these different platforms. So for us right now, it's about how do we take our social content, use it more as testing grounds for content, right? What's working, what's not working, and things like TikTok really help because we can now see average time, average watch time, all that kind of things. So we want to leverage that to figure out what's working and then create shows. So we just actually launched our first animated show. It was called The Association. It's basically a hybrid between NBA and The Office. So our goal would be to create an animated series where the players are people from The Office and it's behind the scenes and how trades happened and things like that. So we launched our first episode. We got about 1 million views on it. So we're using that to go to, the McDonald's of the world and different brands to be like, hey, here's a way you can integrate in your new burger launch or whatever it may be, while also creating original IP that could then sit as short form content. Because I see that being the future on Netflix and HBO, where you can go and watch 3-minute series, 5-minute series.
Got it. Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. Very cool. And just for the group, we'll start kind of getting questions. Feel free to start asking here in the chat, and we'll incorporate those as we can. But since we were just talking about the office space stuff, we had a question about reopening an office post-pandemic. So are you thinking about ever going back to having an office, or will you just end up being virtual, indefinitely?
I think we would primarily for the initiatives around video content, a studio, and office space. So yeah, I think that would make sense. We also have reporters for the Lakers and Clippers, so maybe close to Staples Center would make sense, where people could spend time before and after games to do their work. So that's kind of the goal around office space. I think we would probably do it going into next year, barring any other COVID related issues.
Got it. Okay. All right. Perfect. And another person asked a question of like, what's ClutchPoint's primary business model, and has it changed over time?
Yeah, so our business model is fairly simple. It's about using all the impressions we get, whether it's on social, video, any platform that we have, to turn it into revenue for brands. But during that path, when we first started, like I mentioned on Facebook, they didn't pay anything. There was no revenue there. So our only way to make revenue was to build a website. So we built ClutchPoints.com, the website. And as part of that website, we started learning SEO, how to use Google as a platform, doing original content, getting domain authority, all those kinds of things. So our primary revenue source continues to be our website. We do about 25 to 30 million hits a month on our website. And those hits then turn into revenue based on where they're located, where they're from, things like that. And on top of that, we have exclusive partnerships. We have an exclusive partnership with FanDuel for sports betting and fantasy. So that allows us to create more content. And our future would be looking at like an Adidas, Nike, Under Armour relationship for kicks or fashion or whatever it may be, to kind of create more buckets of revenue.
Got it. Okay. All right. Interesting. Now, obviously the sports space is, an ever evolving sector and has a lot of interesting things happening with it, especially from the media side of things. And I feel like, myself as a consumer has seen the evolution where now I feel like I get pulled much more into the lives of the athletes themselves. You sort of get this behind the scenes view. I know like during the Olympics, it was like, these like, things from TikTok and whatnot. And it was like, people from before and after. And just wondering, how do you kind of see the changing, landscape, maybe working for ClutchPoints in that regard, this idea of it being more personal or just more access in general with the, the athletes?
Yeah, I think that's something we're really trying to tie into. And I think the teams are slowly starting to get it too. I think it's definitely turning into a creator marketplace for people. A lot more people start to relate to things or buy things based on if a person tells them, right? Or a friend tells them. So I think the world is definitely going to be about micro influencers and influencers in general. So that's kind of our vision and our kind of content that we want to do. I don't think teams or leagues are up there yet, but the goal would be, why have a reporter for ClutchPoints go to the game? I'd rather have like a TikTok influencer. So there's an actual personality talking to these other personalities to create content that they can each grow off of. So that's kind of the vision we have to get people in all these arenas instead of just writing content. Sure, that could be a part of it, but on top of that, doing actual influencer content.
Mm. Yeah. And I mean, also the other thing it kind of reminds me of is just the idea of this sort of, I don't know, disintermediation of some of the traditional media rights holders where, we've had this long thing of, paying huge amounts of money for live streaming sports rights. And now, having issues with ESPN and subscriber count and things of that nature, and just sort of things changing and how, that sort of works from, I don't know, a payment perspective. Because, if you're paying, I don't know how many $1 billion a year for the rights to XYZ, sport, and now you're trying to sell against it, I don't know, like to me, it seems like you have to have more of like a multi-channel marketing strategy of some kind. Like if you're an ESPN or a major network, and maybe incorporate, obviously beyond television, but to these other avenues to somehow, kind of spread it out, because I just feel like I'm not sure how those things will sort of intersect over time.
Yeah, and I think even the NBA or NFL is noticing that right now. NFL games are streamed on Twitter, for example, or NBA games can be streamed on YouTube TV, or Fubo TV, or all these different platforms. So I think they're trying to hedge their bets too and be like, hey, we're not just putting all our eggs in the ESPN basket. Let's not make it exclusive. Let's share the rights. So yes, they can be the one that film it, but it's on a lot of different platforms. So I think that's going to open the door for creators to now also start using rights. And then obviously the NBA takes a cut of it, but it's a way for them to grow and build their brand, leveraging these viral celebrities who are athletes now.
Yeah. 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 I think the other interesting thing right now is that, like, if you look at like content in general, it feels like maybe we hit peak content expenditure, well, in a near term basis with like the Netflixes of the world and things like that, where, now it's suddenly like, okay, maybe we can't do this spend model, without the monetization, or if they're having drops in subscriber count. But sports, just seems to, have this, obviously the live factor being such a big part of it, a super interesting sector with everything going on there. But one other part that, was brought up here that it's also, I think, super interesting has been the emergence of esports, and that sort of being a whole other genre. Is ClutchPoints interested or doing anything with esports now?
Yeah, so we have an esports team. It's called ClutchPoints Gaming, and we have it's sitting on our editorial side, social side. By social, we kind of actually separated it out. So we don't actually have one team that runs all of social anymore because it just got too expansive overall. Right. So we have a Facebook, Instagram team that work together. We have a live tweeting team that works separately from that. We have a Snapchat team that does original shows. And then we also have like the TikTok team. So every platform has kind of their goals and initiatives for growth. And we do that for every single platform, whether it be ClutchPoints. We have sports specific accounts like ClutchPoints NBA, ClutchPoints NFL, and then we have the gaming one as well. But that's a way for us to increase our uniques and get to a demographic we don't normally get to. And then outside of that, we're also doing women's sports, and we're also doing HBCUs. So we want to start covering those to the same depth we do the NBA.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So, okay. Doesn't surprise me that you're already doing something on that front as well. So yeah, I had some other questions about, in terms of hiring and, what you look for in an employee, or do you have any kind of mapping in terms of different stages, let's say, obviously hiring, the 150 person is different than the third. So yeah, just kind of wondering, do you have any approach or rubric, or is there any way you kind of think about hiring in that regard?
Yeah, I think for the first 75 or so people, I was kind of very actively involved in that hiring process, figuring out who fit, who didn't fit. We'd actually always start everyone, because the way we do things is very different. And even if you have social media experience at one place, it could be very different from another place, or writing experience, or whatever type of role we're hiring for. So for the first 75, we kind of handpicked. And now for the next 75, what we essentially did is brought people on like a 2-week trial run. Like, hey, it's paid run. We'll see how you do if you get it. Because what we noticed is people that just didn't get it in the first 2 weeks just never ended up getting it. So we wanted to see how quickly they learned and kind of moved forward in the way we wanted to do things. And Yeah, so we have less churn overall if we do that way. So at 2 weeks, we both decide, hey, is it a fit from us? Is it a fit from you guys? If so, then we move forward.
Huh, it's interesting. I remember at one point Zappos had a thing where when you joined after, I don't remember the time period, let's say like 30 or 60 days or something, they gave you some bonus to quit. And it was like, basically like, we want you to get out of here. So if you're willing to take our, $1,200 bonus or whatever the number was, it was sort of this like litmus test for the people. So that's interesting. I think this idea of sort of being able to trial with people, especially if it's project based, makes a lot of sense. And it's actually something I always recommend with the Startup UCLA teams is they're kind of like, how do I know if it's going to be a good fit with this person or whatnot? And, obviously there's times where you can go into things like vesting and, have that be a protection for the company. But a lot of times it's just kind of like, look, do you like working with this person? And, can you actually try it out in some small way? And so I like that project-based approach for sure. So yeah. The next question is also kind of based a little bit more in terms of, the questions here, but I guess on a higher level is sort of like, we're taking a step back. How do you think about things, maybe from a long-term perspective or like from a vision perspective of things? Like, is there some guiding voice for you or something that kind of, you have in the back of your head, whether that be for ClutchPoints or, even on a greater level that helps you kind of navigate, your entrepreneurial journey? I know it's sort of a big loaded question, but, let's put it to you.
Yeah, I think overall for me, it's about building a brand. I think in the beginning, when you first start building these things, you're like, okay, let's try to drive as much revenue as possible, or let's try to get as much content going as possible. I think over time, you start realizing like, what's the end goal with that? Because you can continue doing that every single day. So what we started then focusing on is, I think at a certain point, you always say you want quantity over quality, but at a certain point, you're doing a lot of quantity. So our focus kind of became more on the quality side and making sure, hey, we have the team ready. Let's not look at everything on like, hey, how much are we paying per social post or per editorial or things like that. Let's look at how are we growing the brand month to month, right? Because there's so many people that have been around for years and years doing this. So for me, it's like, how do we get taken in that same voice as a legitimate brand? And that's kind of what our core focus has been, to create original content where we're in franchises where people know like, oh, this is the ClutchPoints brand, or it's a bunch of different brands within. So we want to create our own channels, our own voices. So right now we've hired a bunch of personalities. They come in, they create original video content for us, and we see what kind of affinity our fans have towards them. And if they have a high affinity towards a certain type of content, then we'll spin up a show and scale it around that person. So we sell basically actors, right? Voiceover actors on a vision that, hey, you can have your own show. And how can we create our own slate of shows on a daily, weekly basis? So that's kind of the vision on how we want to really build a brand and be known through multiple different channels, right? Whether it be on Twitter for tweeting, on social, on editorial, on podcasts, every single way, they all kind of tie back to, okay, the ClutchPoints brand is legit in all these different aspects.
Yeah, I always think it's cool when I'm just searching for something independently or whatever, come across ClutchPoints and it's like an article services or whatever, because I feel like it's always cool to sort of see it as an independent thing getting surfaced to me. And then, I've seen it kind of evolve over time, seen the graphics, like I sort of get the look and feel of it. And so it's been cool to kind of see that evolve as well within the company. So yeah, now, I mean, obviously like we love to talk about all the wins and, everything's great and whatever, but we know that there's obviously some hiccups along the way. So what are some things that, happened with you or with ClutchPoints along the entrepreneurial journey that, weren't exactly the best, or, things you had to overcome along the way?
Yeah, working with platforms is tough, right? We were with Google and we're basically we're dependent on them for ad revenue. Right. At a certain point, 100% of our ad revenue was coming from them. And we got caught in some, issue with Google. We had no idea what, right? Because there's no one to talk to. And it's like, hey, you've been banned from Google, right? Your URL. And it's like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. At 12 months, we just kept filing appeals in every way we could. No one really talks to us. And randomly at 12 months, it's gone, right? That appeal is gone. And we somehow got back into the system. No email or nothing from Google. But the issue was, during that year, we could have easily kind of just sat there and been like, okay, let's just wait for Google to come back. But we continued down the same path we would have regardless. So while that 1 year we didn't have any growth in revenue, when we came back the year after, it more than doubled in revenue because we were waiting on that Google stuff to come back and continue to do the right thing for that full year. So that part kind of sucked and set us back in terms of revenue, but it kind of came back to us, and we just follow the rules and do what we're supposed to. But yeah, I think the biggest issue is being so platform dependent. And honestly, we got very lucky in the beginning where Facebook was very popular and drove us enough traffic where for the first 3 years, Google didn't even take our site seriously. They wouldn't even open the faucet to get any page views. Now we can rank for almost anything. But Facebook actually helped us through that period, be able to pay our staff, get us through that point. And then when Google finally opened up their faucet, Facebook tried to trickle down because less people were using it. And now all these new platforms, it's not really about getting clicks anywhere. It's just about creating content on that platform. So we kind of given up on like leveraging these platforms to get clicks. It's just create good content and build a brand, even though we're not really making a positive revenue. We kind of, the way I look at it is whatever revenue we're generating from the website gets cut into different buckets, and social is one of them.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. How is Startup UCLA helpful to you along the way in your entrepreneurial journey? And do you have any advice for people who are in the program right now in terms of availing of things?
I mean, yeah, I think we made some of our best contacts through Startup UCLA. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we took over 2 other teams, so we kind of engulfed them into ClutchPoints. So I think talking to each other and talking about issues or problems, even though like I met a lot of you guys today, guys and girls, and everyone's working on different projects, right? And I think you think that, oh, this does not help me in any way. But I learned from the most random projects people were working on. It's like they all kind of tie together in everyone's entrepreneurial journey. So I think looking at everyone being like, don't just shut them off because like this thing, I don't even care about this concept. I think anything could kind of help you help your own business grow. If you give them advice, it might open up some questions in your mind too.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, no, that's great advice for sure. And so, when you kind of think about, ClutchPoints here in the future, where do you see it going here in 5 years? Like, there's a lot of things changing in the media landscape. There's a lot of things changing in terms of the way people consume content. I think it's a really exciting time. So, but just wondering, what, how you kind of see it evolving from there.
Yeah, so I think definitely want to be a premium publisher, right? In terms of the type of people we have, the staff we have, we want to kind of be an inside source, kind of build up that brand, and the fact that those athletes would take us in a place where, hey, I trust you with this information, right? That's kind of the place we want to be from the editorial standpoint. From the video side, we already talked about it, those IP franchises and things of that nature. Apparel, that's a big one for us, hitting on apparel as it's trending, as it's happening, and trying to drive sales on that. And then kind of our commitment overall to the HBCUs and women's sports and all that. That's kind of a key initiative for us as well, to make sure that we're fully doing everything that the US is interested in. And then beyond that, doing a global expansion into like soccer, cricket, and international sports as well.
All right, awesome, love it. And I think we have time for maybe like 1 or 2 more questions here. So I'm just going to look in the chat real fast. And so one question was, have you ever had to fire a type of customer? And in other words, have you ever had to pivot customer base, and if so, why? Or maybe it's even a business opportunity or something like that where you had to make a change.
So not fire an employee. This is more about firing a company. Yeah, when we first started, we were part of networks, right? We were never big enough scale wise where advertisers would talk to us directly. So the first company we actually worked with was USA Today. We were part of their like sports network, and they would essentially have this whole network of sites where, hey, maybe we drove 5 million views. This company drove 5 million. Together, they'd go to a big brand and be like, hey, we're USA Today. Our network as a whole generates 100 million, right? And we're 5% of that, or 10%, whatever it was at the time. So that was a tough part to be in, and you never really get that attention because as part of that 100 million they have, 50 million of them, it might be theirs, right? So they're trying to prioritize all the revenue to them, and then you're essentially left with whatever's left over. So we did that with network to network, and we kind of left networks throughout the way to figure out what was our own path. And now we're finally in a place where we're controlling more of the ecosystem and in a closer knit community with Google. So we're able to take more of the margin, more of the growth. But yeah, those are the types of the relationships we had to turn down, even relationships where they were paying us more money than we would have potentially made ourselves. But it allowed us to build a vision for the future where we were independent to working with others.
Okay. Yeah, love that. Totally makes sense. Well, good. Well, I think that's a great way to end it, Nish. So thank you so much for making time. Excited to see all the growth in ClutchPoints and getting the team to the size it is. It's really incredible progress. So, thank you for coming back here to Startup UCLA, and excited to see where you take it from here.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks everyone. If you guys ever need anything, feel free to email me anytime.
All right, perfect. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.